First of all, I think your analysis was very straight-lined. History doesn't run in a straight line.
Kid, you cannot tell your neighbor he is stealing ducks when you are stealing fowls.
As High Commissioner, I was wrong. As Charandas Prasad, I reacted naturally how any person would have.
I did not come here for that kind of abuse. I did not come here for that kind of abuse. If you're going to go down that road, I'll walk off.
But it's all okay once they're talking. If they weren't talking, I could not have been here today.
You got ADHD.
I got nothing.
Calm down.
I think I've done enough in terms of taking our team out of trouble from losing.
Come on, Lou Taylor. That's good.
I'm reading the script now, and the first person that comes to my mind to play a detective,
Yes,
but
an
an erratic
Mikhail
detective is Mikhail Rodriguez.
Why an African slapping in young? Why a man and slap a woman? Look, how you deal with that? You deal with that.
We must encourage platforms like this because it brings together different people and allows for discussions to take place in our country on a multiplicity of fundamental issues.
Gildarie, you apologizing for something you think I did is wrong. I don't want you to do that, and you should not have done that.
Hi, good evening and welcome once again to the Gildarie Freddie Kissoon show, wherever you are, whatever it is that you're doing, good night, good morning to you. We also coming to you live on TBN on YouTube. So I hope that you're going to sit back and enjoy. It's going to be a very interesting program tonight. We're going to talk on some legal issues. We're going to talk some current issues that concern this country when it comes to the laws of Guyana and about some new laws. Here in our midst today is a very important man, probably one of the most important when it comes to the protection of this country. I'm not going to waste any time tonight. I'm going to jump right into it and invite within a few seconds our co-host, Freddie Kissoon, as always. He is an interesting person too, and tonight he's smelling up this entire studio. I'm not sure why he's doing that, but he has to explain himself. I think he is quite capable of doing that. And he is here also to introduce our guest this evening, Freddie Kissoon.
Hello there, wherever you are. This is the Gildarie Freddie Kissoon show. We're not going to get all we want to discuss in an hour. So let's get on with it. I wrote a column 3 Sundays ago in the Chronicle in which I listed my favorite politicians, unapologetically because of the long relation I've had with Anil Nandlall. The things that Anil Nandlall have done in times of crises in my life. I want to say this, in times of crises in my life, in time when my wife and I and my daughter, the Kissoon family, needed a friend, Anil Nandlall was there. This was despite all outside of politics, anything. I went to Anil and I said, I want to move out of Workmanville. My daughter is getting big. And it was Anil that secured the land that I built my house on. He told me it was available. He made some arrangement for me to approach the buyer. So our guest this evening is someone that is very special to my heart. And I have said that several times because I know what he and Isu Prasad have done for me in my life. I would not have reached where I have reached. I would not have been a happy man as I am now if it wasn't for those 2 persons. So once again, our guest is the Attorney General, Anil Nandlall. But before we start with the serious business of law and politics, he was here about a year ago and he bought 2 guava from his tree. We didn't put it on the show because Guyanese critic took one in the studio and I kept one. So I will give Gildarie one tonight. That is what Gildarie meant by smelling up the studio. The famous one, the most famous writer, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, has a fantastic novel named The Fragrance of Guava. So that is what is smelling up the studio. Now, before we get into the questions, congratulations to Anil Nandlall on his just born baby boy. I hope Anil knows that there must be more to come. That boy will need siblings. So let me ask him, you agree that large families are happy families, AG?
Yes, I do.
Oh, so we will expect some more toddlers running around the place.
The mother is most important in making that decision.
Of course not. I want to start, and then we'll go to Gildarie. Vincent Alexander was here as a guest, and he wants to debate you because he said for him the thing that was wrong with the 2020 election, and he cannot pronounce it as being legitimate because the East Coast votes had a lot of problems. And unless you do another election with those East Coast votes, he would not pronounce the election as being legitimate. And he said he's quite willing to debate you on the East Coast votes.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of your show, and I'm happy to be here. Freddie, thank you very much for those gracious remarks that you have made about me, and I'm very flattered. It is not surprising, I'm sure, to your audience and to your viewers that Vincent Alexander's biggest problem with the 2020 election is the East Coast votes. The rest of the world will tell you that the biggest problem in relation to the 2020 elections was the attempt by Mingo, Lowenfield, and Vincent Alexander's political party to use a spreadsheet at Ashmin's building instead of the statements of poll in their concerted effort to commit a fraud at the 2020 elections. And then the series of machinations by Lowenfield in particular and his cohorts, including leaders of the Vincent Alexander's political party, to refuse to use the recount ballots counted at the convention center as the basis for the declaration of the final results. The entire Guyana, or the entire credible Guyana, the entire CARICOM region, and 100 countries across the globe saw that as the most fundamental challenges at the 2020 elections. So right there, Vincent Alexander is living in an alternative world. That's the first thing I want to say. Secondly, I have no problem in debating Vincent Alexander or anyone on any given topic. That is the second thing. The third thing, what is he talking about the East Coast votes? So bear with me 5 minutes. Let me tell you what happened and what I believe he's referring to. So on the night of the elections itself, I had responsibility for the East Coast of Demerara. Several of my political activists working with me, including our polling agents, reported that a number of presiding officers in a particular geographic area on the East Coast of Demerara, and I could tell you where it is, from somewhere about Better Hope to LBI, that catchment area, that the presiding officers were not putting certain statutory documents in the envelope that they were supposed to be placed in. I called the assistant returning officer for that area, and the assistant returning officer confirmed that that is so. I then called Mr. Claremont Mingo, the returning officer, and I reported that incident to him. He told me that he will call me back. Mr. Mingo called me back and reported that he has been made aware that certain of his presiding officers, upon the instruction of one of their superiors, they were misled in those instructions in misplacing certain statutory documents and putting them where they should not be. He told me that when the envelopes reach him, because they were, the next step is, after the statements of poll and so on are collected, the documents are to be transmitted to the returning officer. That's the process under the Representation of the People's Act. He said to me that when the documents reach him, he will ensure that they are put where they should be. I asked him to report that to his CEO, the Chief Elections Officer, Mr. Keith Lowenfield. He called me back and he said he has reported that to Mr. Lowenfield. Nothing was made of that issue. You had the entire saga that unfolded at Ashman's building, unfolded, we went to court, and you had all the drama and the shenaniganism that took place. No one made an issue at that time in relation to this incident. So I assume that it is not an incident, that is, there is no issue. It is when the recount began at the Artachon Convention Center that it was discovered that these documents were put in an envelope that they were not supposed to be placed in. And the APNU began to raise that as objections in the different counting stations. And they started to make that an issue in the press. I immediately went to Mr. Keith Lowenfield, right in that building, the Artachon Convention Center, and I reminded him of this incident that occurred on elections night, which I informed him that Mr. Mingo told me he made him aware of. That is, Mingo informed Lowenfield. Mr. Lowenfield confirmed to me that he is aware and that the documents are not missing, that they are in the possession of GCOM and they are stored at Collingen compound where GCOM has a bond and GCOM stores materials. After I had that discussion with Mr. Lowenfield, I went out. You would recall they had daily press reporters outside of the Artachon Convention Center during that period. And I reported that to the press, that Mr. Lowenfield told me that the statutory documents are not missing and that they are in the possession of GCOM and that they are stored at Collingen, and at the appropriate time he will retrieve them. And he didn't see that as an issue. When I made that disclosure, the following day, I distinctly remember Mr. Lowenfield telling me in a conversation that he will have to stop speaking with me because things that he tells me in confidence, I am reporting it to the press. And I made it abundantly clear to Mr. Lowenfield right there and then. I said, if you and I are discussing electoral matters, the most important national event taking place in this country, and I have a particular statutory role to play, and you are the chief elections officer, and the two of us are discussing electoral matters, by what process of logic can that be described and characterized as confidential, secret conversations? We are discussing official political business of national importance, and I have a duty, if I consider it necessary, to disclose it. And if you are of the view that whenever you and I speak on electoral matters, that we are discussing confidential affairs, I want to disabuse your mind of that view, because we are not. So that is how that issue unfolded. In any event, Freddie and Gildarie, how law is logic. The law is not this mysterious web of rules that people would like it to be. Non-lawyers would like it to be. Let me tell you, law is based upon common sense and based upon logic and is designed to attain what is called justice. Justice is essentially fairness. How can 10,000 people, for example, vote for a political party? They go to the polling station, they cast their ballot in favor of a political party of their choice. Some election functionary either omit to do what they are statutorily required to do or refuse to do what they are statutorily enjoined to do and omitted to do some function. How can that ever invalidate the 10,000 votes that the citizens have cast in favor of a political party of their choice? Which legal system, which system of the rule of law will ever countenance such nonsensical suppositions? You are telling me that I walk into a polling station to exercise my constitutional right to elect the government of my choice and to vote for my political party, and I mark that X in the place that it's supposed to go, and my ballot is a valid ballot, and I put it in that ballot box and I gone home. Through no fault of mine, you are telling me by the act of a third party omitting to do what that third party is required to do, that can have the impact of invalidating my franchise? Which system of law in this civilized world will ever countenance that process? All you got to do, Freddie and Gildarie, is interpret what these people are saying, analyze it, and you will see how ridiculous it is. That is what Vincent Alexander wants to discuss with me and debate with me. That is a complete and utter waste of my time. If he wants to constructively debate on a matter of importance and of some significance, of course I will engage him. But I will not engage him on a matter that is so elementary and his arguments in relation thereto is so illogical.
Thank you very much. Freddie Kissoon, thank you very much to the Guava. And aside from that, before I come to some questions here, I saw former AFC Minister David Patterson arrested this afternoon for exposing, or allegation rather, of exposing his genitals, caught in camera and waving to the camera. He's been placed in $200,000 bail. Minister, a few nights back, we had Ralph Ramkaran on this show. And the question was posed to Mr. Ralph Ramkaran as an attorney at law. We referred to him in the case of Nigel Nandlall, former Minister of Local Government. And there's been some parts of society, sections of society, has been arguing that despite the alleged victim withdrawing a case, no longer wanting to give evidence or no longer interested in the case, that there's some sections of society believe that the state, the police, could have still gone ahead and charged Nigel Nandlall. Your thoughts, sir?
Okay, so
Mr. Ramkaran said he still could.
Yeah, he believes that he could have gone.
So let me make it clear that Nigel Nandlall is a comrade in my party. He was a colleague in our cabinet. So whatever views I have, no matter how objective I try to portray them, they are always going to be interpreted as prejudiced and biased in favor of Nigel Nandlall. So let me say that I have that conflict of interest, for want of a better expression. But I am also a lawyer. And let me say that it's the DPP that must make pronouncements in terms of criminal matters and whether charges should be filed or not filed, or whether charges should be prosecuted, and if they are charged or discontinued in prosecution. Those are all matters within the functional remit of the Director of Public Prosecutions, an independent constitutional office holder. And the Constitution also says that the DPP must not be subject to the influence or instructions or directions of any other person or authority. Those are the constitutional protection that that office enjoys. I want to put these matters squarely on the table before I speak to address the question that you've asked. So let me speak now as a lawyer. I'm not speaking here as Attorney General. I said, I should not speak on this matter as Attorney General, but as a lawyer. A person has made an allegation, and then the person has withdrawn the allegation and indicated that they do not wish to proceed.
Was an allegation made by that person?
Well, based upon what
was reported,
what has been reported, at least there was a file of an allegation, and the file was sent to the Director of Public Prosecutions, and the Director of Public Prosecutions requested for the investigation to be done. So obviously there was an allegation made. Mr. Dharamlal was arrested and he was placed on bail. So obviously the police had some basis to act. But subsequently, the very person who made the allegation indicated that they do not wish to continue. So Mr. Ramkaran apparently is of the view that a charge can still be filed. But who will be the complainant? Criminal charges, like civil charges, are not initiated with automaticity and by a phantom machinery. There must be a complainant or a plaintiff. The judicial system and the legal system and courts of law do not operate in vain. They do not sit to determine academic and hypothetical questions, either in civil law or in criminal law. So somebody must come forward to the judicial system and say, I have a grievance, and I would like the processes of the judiciary, whether under its criminal arm or civil arm, to be activated to process my grievance and to deliver justice to me in accordance with law. Where is that person? You see, anybody can theorize. The DPP and every lawyer they have a duty to act in a pragmatic manner, having regard to how the legal system functions. The CCJ, or highest court, pronounced some years ago in a case from Belize that courts of law must not sit to determine hypothetical questions that society may have orbiting out there. Courts of law sit to settle disputes and grievances between parties, real parties and real grievances. The young lady, for whatever reason, said that she doesn't wish to proceed with the complaint. Who would have been the first witness in the witness box? How her statement would have been tendered into evidence if she is not there? That would become hearsay, inadmissible hearsay. And I could go on to give you more and more reasons. So, respectfully, I disagree with Mr. Ramkaran's contention. And this has nothing to do with whether the case was against Dharamlal or anybody else. Take out the parties from the case. I'm dealing with the legal issue. And I hope that your viewers interpret it that way. I don't feel that I am jumping to a particular conclusion because of who the party is in the matter. I'm giving my objective legal analysis of a factual situation that you present to me.
And a quick follow-up from on that. Do you know of any cases, any old cases, in which somebody would have withdrawn as the complainant, and yet the state went ahead and placed charges?
I don't know of any.
In a similar case like this, when it's a rape?
I don't know of any. And Mr. Ramkaran should, to buttress his argument, should have cited one. Now, in murder cases, there is no virtual complainant because the person is dead.
Yeah, right.
That's the difference. That's the exception, right? But in any other case, you have to have someone to push the machinery forward.
Thank you.
I don't know how we're going to get away from this because of you're the AG. Are we going to... But bear up with me, just with Mr. Ramkaran once more. Mr. Ramkaran did a column, has a blog called Conversation Tree, and the Starbook took his blog and ran it front page with the headline, Mr. Ramkaran said the criminal justice system is facing imminent collapse. And he went on to say trials take long, the jury system is questionable, etc. And he advocated in that article, which the Starbook promulgated, that the jury system should be abolished.
The jury system?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he cited Canada and India where he said they have abolished it.
Okay, so you have jumped from the justice system collapsing to the jury system being abolished.
Right, those are two of the things that he mentioned.
He's proposing that, or
one is a statement that the justice system, and he talked about people being long on trial, the shortage of judges, etc. And then he made that thing about the abolition of the jury system, which I believe is connected because he's saying maybe if you abolish juries, you'll have a better criminal system. I don't know. I'm just suggesting that.
And you're asking me?
Yes. For your thoughts and...
Oh, okay. All right. So we have problems in the criminal justice system as well as in the civil justice system. Recently, the Caribbean Court of Justice sat in Guyana and they held a confabulation at the Arthur Chung Convention Center one Saturday evening. And the topic for discussion is the state of the criminal justice system in the Caribbean. And the CCJ holds the view that the criminal justice system in the entire Caribbean is afflicted with serious problems. The CARICOM heads of government convened a special symposium at the Hyatt Regency in Trinidad and Tobago 2 months ago, at which they discussed the level of criminality and public safety and the level of criminality in the region. And one of the consensual view expressed at that symposium was that the criminal justice system in the region is facing tremendous challenges and problems and require reforms. The Guyana criminal justice system is part and parcel of the Caribbean system, and all the reservations and concerns expressed both by the CCJ and by the Caribbean heads of government, they apply to Guyana with equal force as they apply to the other countries. As Attorney General with responsibility for the justice system, it would be wrong for me to sit here and not acknowledge that the criminal justice system in our country is facing serious challenges. In fact, our government is prepared, and we are working, first of all, assiduously, as far as the law permits, to address those problems. We are passing legislation every day, and I can deal with that separately. How many legislation we are passing, how much funds we are allocating to the judiciary, an independent constitutional body, to address these systems, under a loan program that my ministry is administering, specifically directed to the criminal justice system, with the core objective of reducing the prison population. My ministry is spending millions of dollars in the penal system, the prison system, at the level of the police force, and in the criminal justice system, the lower judiciary, the magistracy, in our efforts from the executive position to address these various deficiencies. It is a work in progress. We will continue as a government to work with the judiciary to ensure that this machinery functions in a manner that can deliver timely justice to the people of Guyana. Yes, we have delays, chronic delays. We have problems at the magisterial level with the personnel. We have erratic sentences, and you wrote about it quite recently. We have irregular exercise of discretion in terms of the grant of bail, and we have addressed that, or attempted to address that, with a Bail Act. I am working now with a consultant on promulgating sentencing guidelines to bring uniformity, bring consistency, and settle the established principles that will guide and inform sentences in relation to the different type of offenses. You know, you have aggravating circumstances, you will have extenuating circumstances, you have different type of offenses that will carry different penalties, you have the level of violence that must be proportionate with the sanction to be imposed. All these are principles that are established, but they are not in Guyana in one singular document. This sentencing guideline will become a compendium of all the principles in relation to sentencing to bring regularity and consistency in sentencing. So when Freddie Kissoon wants to know what is the sentencing policy of Guyana, I can point Freddie Kissoon to a singular document. The judiciary's input is crucial. The DPP's input is crucial. The police input is crucial. The prison authorities' input is crucial. The practicing bar and the populace generally. The consultant is working with all these important stakeholders to produce this final document, and that I'll deliver a copy to you. But so work is being done on the criminal justice system. Jury reform. Now, it is a very controversial thing whether to abolish the jury system or not. Mr. Ramkaran holds the view that it should be abolished, based upon what you have informed me. If you ask the criminal lawyers, they will be vehemently opposed to that. They will tell you that the jury system is based upon the right of an individual to be tried by his peers. And that is the quintessential principle upon which the jury system is constructed. It is hundreds of years old, and many people will be opposed to it. The truth is that countries are moving away from the jury system. England itself, where the system was started and where the system was born, has moved away from the jury system, from jury trials in many offenses. India, in the Caribbean, right here in the Caribbean, there are many cases that are not tried by a jury in Trinidad that are tried by a jury in Guyana. So there are pros and cons. I support a system that reduces the number of cases that are to be tried by juries. Where do you place the power to determine which case should be tried by jury? Do you leave that with the accused to say, I want to be tried by a jury? Or do you leave that with the judge to determine that these types of cases, or I will determine which case I will try with a jury or not? These are very crucial questions that one will have to determine. Now, I have asked, for example, for the judiciary to revamp the jury pool. And I made the point that, as I said, the foundational principle of jury trial is trial by one's peer. Now, the jury pool in Guyana has not been revamped for perhaps 40 years. So you have companies there that are no longer functional. Or you have a class of employees there, like the matron, the cleaner at the city council. And I don't wish to belittle anyone, but do these persons now reflect an accused peer? Do they? Now, 40 years ago, that may have been the position. So when you assemble a Georgetown jury or a jury from Berbice, having regard to the stagnated nature of the pool, and you draw from that stagnant pool, are those 12 persons that you are drawing to put on the jury, do they accord with the accused peers? One have to investigate that. Then another important issue that one has to look at is, does the accused or this, many people forget that a trial involves two sets of interests, at least. You have the accused person, and you also have the victim, the state. And the state represents the moral conscience of a society and the victim. And the state has the legal duty to ensure that there is public order. All these interests are canvassed before a court in a criminal trial. It's not only the accused rights. Sometimes we forget that, and we focus only on the accused rights. The accused has a whole set of safeguards that protects his rights, and justifiably so. For not one moment would I ever want to diminish the rights and safeguards of an accused person. But at the same time, the scale is not an imbalanced one. It is a balanced one. And the state's interest is equally important on the highway to justice. It's not a one-way street. So, is the state getting a fair trial in a complicated fraud case in front of a jury of the type that I've described, where you have fraud sometimes, depending upon the complexity of the fraud, you have complex auditing, accounting principles, you have technical and complicated documents that one has to interpret, and because that's part of the evidence. Can a jury appreciate the intricacies of the specialty of the area that is involved in the trial? And at the end, because of ignorance and because of a lack of understanding, the jury comes to a verdict that is not cognizant or consistent with the evidence. Not because the jury is perverse, because the jury is incapable of assimilating, interpreting, and applying the evidence in the manner that a competent jury should. You have an acquittal. Is that justice? You understand? And I just give you one example. You have cases where you have extraneous influences which should not contaminate a trial, but you have it because that's the nature of the society in which you're operating. Interests that have no place in a court of law, but they permeate the human mind because the human being is a product of a society. Are you going to get a fair trial in those circumstances? You remember the famous Anil Nandlall matter.
Yeah.
That's a terrible example to use, but the administration at the time felt that the state could not have gotten a fair trial in the county of Berbice.
So
and I repeat, and they moved it to Georgetown.
Yeah.
But of course, they wanted a verdict, a particular verdict, which they didn't get in Georgetown either, because of the activism of Walter Rodney, the People Progressive Party, etc. But I'm saying to you that these are circumstances that can objectively justify not having a jury trial for a particular type of offenses. If you want to abolish the jury system completely, it's a much more fundamental question that one would prudently have to engage in public consultations on. And the government would be wise enough to travel that road. But it's not a question of government alone. It's a question of the judiciary as well.
Thank you. AG,
Gildarie?
yes. I want to ask you along the same lines. We still have on our books the death penalty. Is there any contemplation by this particular government here to probably do away with it, to introduce it back again in its original form? What are we doing?
Every government in the Caribbean is confronted with a conundrum. And the conundrum is that you have a population, if you take, and I'm being very frank here, and your viewers would know what I'm speaking about. You take a poll in Guyana, Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, you choose any country at random, and on whether they want an abolition of the death penalty or a return of the death penalty. And you will see what the results of that poll are going to be.
Well, I could tell you how I would vote. I'm voting for the retention of the death.
Well, you see what I'm saying to you? How would you vote?
I would campaign.
How would you vote?
I think I would go that way too. My dad was skilled in the I got my
right here. I have two persons, two subjects, and both of you are telling me that, and that will be the answer throughout the Caribbean. Then you have the international position. You like to write about class and the mulatto class and all kind of thing.
Middle class.
So there is a class thing as well in the death penalty issue, right? The working people, the ordinary people, they will tell you that they want the death penalty. Then you graduate into a different class and you will see the distance away from the death penalty. Then you have international organizations and so on that question. So it's quite, countries are not pressured, but countries are required to sign on to conventions across the globe that frown upon the death penalty. But you have, in the Caribbean, you have had the problem. Not in the Caribbean, in the third world. Asia, Africa, you have the same issue, because you have a high rate of criminality, especially violent crimes. And people across in these societies are convinced that the death penalty is an effective response. You can tell them all the scientific data and the empirical studies that have been done to show that death penalty being imposed in a particular country does not reduce crime, and so on. They are not buying into that information. Up to now, you hear anecdotal stories of when, at a particular time in the 80s, when a couple people were hanged. And persons will tell you in Guyana now, their perception of the impact, the positive impact that had on the crime rate at the time. You're a social scientist. Carry out that survey. In the mid-80s when there was a series of hanging by Miss Desmond Hoyt administration.
Kick down the door.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. You assess the views of people who were living during that period. They're still around, and they will tell you their interpretation, their perception of the positive impact those hangings had on the crime wave of the day. So that's how I'll answer that question, Gildarie.
You were in the news of saying something that personally touches me and reminds me of our long relation. You took a case pro bono for me in which a father came almost in tears that his daughter didn't get into the law program. And he cited where his daughter's friend who got lesser grades. So you took the case. It so happened, Justice Winston Moore ruled that I should have sued the head of the department, the dean of the faculty, not the head of the department. And the man put a whopping $400,000, what you call it?
Court costs?
Yeah, cost. And that thing stunned me. Well, Isu Prasad came to the rescue. But then you appealed it in front of Justice Perry, and he reduced it to $100,000. And now I see you in the papers saying that there's so many cases that you have won, but the people aren't paying the cost, and it comes to a couple million. Well, so these people took the state to court. They lost, one of which is which you were seeing in the video, they assaulting parliaments, took the mace. They lost the case. But cost Cost is a serious mechanism from stopping people from flippantly abusing the court. Now, if you lose, and you say there are more than 5 cases mounting to millions of dollars that the opposition and other parties haven't paid the cost, that is a serious thing.
So, Freddie, yes, I agree with you. It's a serious thing. But let me go back to how you began this issue. I think you have a wrong recollection of the case that we did before Justice Moore.
That was 95.
Yes, a very long time ago. We won that case.
Yeah, it was 2 parts. We won part. We won.
We got the decision.
That it was coming front to the board.
That's correct. We got, because what was happening at UG at that time was that persons were applying and the applications were not being processed or not taken to the academic board, but were being reviewed initially, and whoever was reviewing it, I believe at that time was the head of the Department of Law, was weeding out from the applications persons whom he believes should not be on that list to send to the academic board. And we won that.
Yeah, we won that.
And that was the essence of the battle. Cost, I believe, was ordered at the Court of Appeal. I can't remember, but anyhow.
So that was by Moore, and we got Court of Appeal to reduce it.
Maybe, yes. Right. So I want to say that we won the battle, right, in that matter. We got the whole year, they admitted they had to redo the application, so the girl eventually got into the program. We should remember who it was, and she has to be a lawyer. She
named Bagwandin.
Okay, well, we've got to check where she is now. So yes, we have been. The state has won a number of these cases, and not only the state. Remember, we began these cases even before we got into government. And I was representing the People's Progressive Party, and we were winning since then while we were in the opposition. And then when we got into government, we continue. So there's a large accumulation of costs in various matters. I'm still to put all together, and I have made that public. But since
they haven't paid us yet.
But since I did that, the ministry received a check from one of the lawyers in a consolidated amount of money. I don't know how much it is, and I'm not clear on to which case it relates. So there has been a payment, and I want to put that out there, but there are many more outstanding sums to be paid. And this only happened, the payment only came, I think, early this week, Monday, I believe. So I haven't been able to look at the documents to see, but there are much more outstanding as well. And I intend to do the necessary and take the necessary steps to ensure. You see, under the new civil procedure rules, there is something called the overriding objective that should inform and guide civil litigation in particular. And among the crucial overriding principles in that overriding objective is the economic and fair use of scarce resources. And that has now become a fundamental ingredient of justice. Judges have to now be wary of how they use the resources available to determine the type of cases that come before them. Litigants, in turn, have to be made conscious, either directly or through their lawyers, that when they approach the court, they must be cognizant of the fact that one of the guiding and fundamental principles of justice now is proper use of the available resources. Look at that case in particular to which you made reference. These are members of parliament who refuse to debate a particular bill, as they have an obligation to do, through which debate they are to voice their opposition and put out their opposing arguments. That is our system. That is our parliamentary system. It's adversarial and it is 2,000 years old. We don't have any other system. And that system is embraced by our supreme law. Instead of doing that which the Constitution enjoins them and permits them to do and give them the right and freedom to do, they choose to descend into the well of the Parliament, a sacred place, and dance and gyrate and whine and break up the property of the Parliament, break the mace, assault the Speaker's staff, try to blow whistle, intimidate the minister from presenting, tear up the amplifier system of the National Assembly. And if one, after that happens, let us say you act, through Dutch courage or some burst of enthusiasm, and you misbehave. All of us are capable of irrational outbursts sometimes that we reflect upon and you regret. But once reason has resumed its natural seat, you would think that, they would want to sweep this thing under the carpet and would not want a repeat of it, and would hope that the population, because they depend on their sustenance, they depend on their existence, on popularity. That's what politicians depend upon, popularity. So one would have hoped that, they would do things that will ensure that the population would forget this, and so that they can turn over a new leaf and move on. Lo and behold, they carry the thing to the court.
You could there's video clips of how they
not only to remind the population and keep it in the public consciousness for the next 2 years, but to have a court forensically examine it piece by piece on a big screen TV, relive the whole experience all over again. That is why sometimes I question the sanity of people. And so a court appropriately should sanction them very severely for wasting the court's time. And that is what in the countryside you call wrong and strong. You're wrong. You want to go now, show you're strong. What do you expect? What do you expect?
AG, in the interest of time, I'm going to throw two questions at you, and then you could probably answer that. Now, recently, you guys, a couple months back, you guys passed the e-bike laws, as I call them. And then subsequently, there's some objections, people in Berbice, and I think it was the vice president who came out and said that we're going to put the implementation of it until December. You have until December of this year to get yourself in order according to that. What is the thinking of government with regards to this particularly e-bikes law? Right.
All right. So let me. I'm glad that you have asked that question. It allows me an opportunity to explain it, because there is so much misinformation, unfortunately, that characterize that issue. So the private sector, the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce, the public at large, the Guyana Road Safety Association, all call upon the government to regulate e-bikes. They produce the statistics. Over the last 2 years, at the time when we passed the law, 2 years prior to that, we passed that law about 3 months ago, right? From the beginning of this year up to that time and last year, 18 people were killed in accidents involving e-bikes. Right now, the police has
there's a large number
for e-bikes for a small country. The police got a whole program dealing with road safety. Freddie and Gildarie, check the statistics. We have, perhaps per capita, the highest incidence of road accidents in the world and fatal accidents in the world. Road accidents generally and fatalities also. Check it. If not the highest, one of the highest in the world.
Shocking.
Per capita.
Shocking.
We lose 200 people per year on the road. right? Every 5 years is 1,000, 5 2 is 1,000. So you have that situation chronically happening in the country. These e-bikes, the allegation is and the complaint is that they don't make a song, or they make a song that is very difficult to hear when you are in your car, and they travel very quickly. In England and in Europe, they have now been regulating them by reducing the speed at which they can travel.
I know they've done that in Holland.
Right, in Holland, right, because they use the parapet up and down, up and down. So they reduce the speedometer. They can't travel beyond a particular rate of speed. We don't have that kind of sophistication here. So they in and out, and the riders do not have helmets.
We had a call in Poland. People saying, one man got 3 children.
Exactly. They drop the children to school, 2 of them on the handle, 1 of them on the shoulder, and 1 on the middle of the seat.
No, it happens.
Imagine if that particular e-bike is involved in an accident, what happened to an entire family is wiped out. So the government was inspired to bring a framework of regulation into place, not to penalize anybody, but to ensure that our roadways and the users of those bikes are put in a safer place. So what is the law that we ask for? We ask that the law that applies to motorcycle apply to e-bike. So you must wear a helmet. Now, what is so wrong about asking you to protect your brain? That's all. And to get it registered, and to have, I don't even think insurance applies. I can't remember. But basically is that, to get you registered so you're in the system, and that you are to observe the laws and the rules of the road. How you want to use the public roadway and don't want to observe the laws and the rules of the road? So you can ride anywhere and you can do anything you want on the road, and we can't charge you because and put any among the person. And when we check the law to charge you, you are not in the category of motor vehicles being regulated by the laws of this country. How can I, as Attorney General, see that state of anarchy developing and lawlessness and do not intervene and advise the government that we have to bring regulation into place? Just quickly.
Yeah.
So we have heard the outcry and we are sympathetic. We have met with the people and we have explained to them, and we have met with the GRA and we have said, look, suspend the requirements of the law for the next till December, so that people get time to acclimatize to it, right? And then secondly, one of the problem is that they have to come all the way to town or to a GRA office to get these licenses. We have asked the GRA that when they're ready to license, go into the communities. Don't let the people come to town, because the big concern is that they can't ride such far distances with the bike. So the GRA will go into the communities at convenient public places and do the licensing. And we are saying to the people that it is not going to cost you a financial cent, no financial cost. But it is largely, and our priority is to protect the users of the road and the e-bikers. That is the motivation.
This is a difficult question. I don't want to push you in any direction with court cases. Just answer in layman terms to me. If there wasn't a stay in the unlimited insurance case that was with Exxon in the court, Justice Rishi Prasad granted a stay. Justice Kissoon ruled that the Exxon must pursue unlimited liability. If there wasn't a stay, didn't it mean that Exxon would have had to stop operations in Guyana?
The operations would have had to come to a halt, or Exxon would have had to continue operations in breach of that court order.
So the court order, if there wasn't a
Because
stay,
the court
or the oil of production would have come to a halt?
Yes, because the court also directed the EPA to revoke the environmental permit. And then the entire operations would have become illegal because they would have been operating without an environmental permit.
I don't want to pursue that, but I feel lay people could understand the law, but I don't feel that's in the jurisdiction. I don't think a court, to me, that is impinging on the separation of power. I think governments regulate investment, governments. But anyway,
those are some of the very grounds upon which the challenge to the judge's ruling is premised.
But I noticed, I'm going to give way to Gildarie, but I want to say something because I noticed the time. You're not going to force that boy to become a lawyer.
Who?
Your son.
Leave the family alone. Have you ever changed the diaper for Freddie Kissoon?
Oh God, too many times.
Okay.
He will be allowed to choose his own profession.
But what you prefer? Engineering, of course, journalism, academia.
Leave the man.
The other thing is, there's so many of our guests that came here with some interesting sartorial manifestation. We had a guy from CARICOM, Neville Bissem, the famous Neville Bissem son. And I've never seen a short jack like that. Now I know there's a short jack and there's a Nehru shirt. That has to be a cross between the two.
It is a cross between a Spanish and Hindi attire.
This is
it's a kurta kind of make a Spanish thing.
A cross between Hindu,
between Indian and I suppose and Spanish. I think so.
Are your closing statements, Minister? Anything you want to say to the people?
Well, I think that we have had a lively and informative discussion. I want to thank you very much for affording me the opportunity to be here in the first place and for affording the opportunity for me to ventilate a lot of important issues, a lot of crucial issues that I would have liked the opportunity to speak on, and you have made it possible. For example, the Vincent Alexander issue. They have been repeating that all over the place. I've tried every time I have tried to answer it, but they keep regurgitating the same foolishness. And in any event, the court had an opportunity to interrogate that very issue. And if Vincent was right, then they would have won the petition. All the petitions were dismissed.
Thank you very much. That, ladies and gentlemen, is our Attorney General Anil Nandlall. Of course, we got to bring him back because there's so many other questions.
He was one of our first guests on this program almost a year ago.
We wanted to ask him questions with local content, of course, big issues, and of course, with our country in the throes of the oil development that's happening here. How is Guyana readying itself legislatively wise to get itself in tune or with the rest of the world? So many other questions, and we'd have to bring him back here. It's always a pleasure talking to him. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope that tonight would have been an interesting night for you, a learning night for you. We also look forward to seeing our West Side people back in Georgetown using the Harbour Bridge within a day. I think it's going to be operation tomorrow night. Been told that the bridge, very good job there by the technicians, the engineers, and of course the government put in a lot of arrangements in place. So thank you.
So
very
the
much.
AG took the water taxi.
I don't know where he took, but
how you got over there, AG?
I don't live on the West Side.
No, but you had to go over there for conduct business, meet people.
Not today. Not since the bridge jam.
Thank you very much to our co-host Freddie Kissoon, and on behalf of myself and Freddie, and of course.
Before you go, can the operator look? Which is the biggest one? Let me see. I can take the biggest one.
Thank you very much, Freddie Kissoon.
What are the
ladies and gentlemen, good night.
What are the trees you have
rest of the night until Friday.
Apart from golf?